Okay, let's give me just 1 second here. I have one thing to do here. Okay, let's open in a word of prayer. Lord, thank you for this day. Lord, we just pray that you'll be with us this day. Lord, we just pray for wisdom of world leaders as some very difficult decisions are being made right now. And we just pray that you will give everyone guidance and acting wisely and justly. In Jesus' name, amen. Well, today we're going to talk about widening war, and I think it's pretty obvious about what's going on. We talk about these things, acceleration, convergence, logistics, understanding, and a lot of them are coming to the fore right now. There's just many, many different things that are going on in the Middle East particularly, and that's going to be most of my focus today. I think that I have plenty of other things to talk about, and I just don't know if I'll have time. I don't even know if I have time to get through all the things I really want to talk about today. So, we talk about this verse a lot about, and I heard, but I understood not. This is Daniel chapter 12, verses 8 to 10. And I heard, but I understood not. Excuse me 1 second here. Thought I had this all up. So I heard not, what shall be the end of these things? And he said, go thy way, Daniel, for the words are closed up and sealed till the time of the end. Many shall be purified and made white and tried, but the wicked shall do wickedly, and none of the wicked shall understand, but the wise shall understand. So we talk about this every week because there's a lot of discussion out there right now about what does this mean? Is this Psalm 83? Is Isaiah 17 going to happen? Is Ezekiel 38 and 39? Prophecies about Elam and Jeremiah 49, destruction of Babylon in Revelation. What's Babylon and how does it come together and all these things? So I probably have a little bit different view of some of my friends on this. By the way, I did a couple interviews this week. I did about an hour talk with J.B. Hickson on Not by Works. I did post that on our YouTube channel. I also did a few minutes with Alex Newman at Liberty Sentinel, and that's also on our YouTube channel. And by the way, I'd also recommend that you watch, I think I might start about 14 minutes into the segment, the half-hour program, Dr. Mordecai Kadar. Dr. Kadar is one of the leading Jewish, if not world experts on Islam and Arabic culture. He's just a superb individual, very wise, and has a lot of thoughts. I highly recommend that you would look up and read some of the things that he has. I referred to him a couple weeks ago with that article from JNS, that's Jewish News Syndicate, jns.org, from April, I think it was April 13th of this year, where he talked about somebody that he had a conversation with, and it laid out in very great detail what could happen in the Middle East in the near future. And it seems to be very, very prescient at this time. So one of the things I want to look at here is, I want to go to this passage. Excuse me 1 second. I want to go to Psalm chapter 122. Psalm 122. No, Psalm 129. So in Jerusalem, and one of the places I got to visit when I was there back in December was this, which is supposed to open to the public soon if anybody ever starts going to Israel again. As far as I know, all tours have been canceled for the time being. I know Delta announced this week that they're not going to have any flights to Israel till at least November 15th. Things are in quite a bit of state of turmoil. They're at war, and people aren't inclined to go to a war zone. So I know many tours have been canceled. I don't know of any that are still there. But in the city of David, the city of David is an interesting discovery. So it was about 16, 17 years ago, maybe 19 years ago, a sewer pipe broke down in the village of Silwan, which is south of the Temple Mount. So the Temple Mount is up here, and then it goes down. And I mean, it goes down to the city of David. It's not, it's much, much lower. By the way, this is one of the reasons why I don't think this theory that the Temple Mount was located in the city of David holds any credence, because to get the elevation correct, they would have had to build a platform about 600 feet high. And there's no evidence. There's no evidence that there was a platform that big. By the way, Joel Kramer the other day, my friend Joel Kramer, I highly recommend his work, put up a video about the Temple Mount and the location of the Temple Mount, and it's just really superb. I mean, Joel is an excellent teacher, excellent archaeologist, so I highly recommend that you go to that. But so this sewer pipe breaks about 18, 19, 20 years ago. They go to fix it, and they start digging, and they start finding stone. And so they start uncovering it, and what they found was the ancient city of David there under the village. So what they've done is they've excavated below the village. So when you see this pilgrimage road, which they are getting ready to open, they had, last I heard, they had less than 100 meters of it to uncover and open up to get all the way from the Pool of Siloam at the south end of the city of David, all the way up to the Temple Mount. And this is the road that the pilgrims would walk on in Jerusalem when they were going up to the Temple Mount. They would go to the Pool of Siloam, which is being uncovered as we speak. It was a large mikvah. And you remember Jesus even used the Pool of Siloam when the man who was born blind, he was told to go wash in the Pool of Siloam. And that's pretty significant, because he couldn't see, he couldn't read the law until he saw the light, until he had his vision restored. And it's very similar. It's a typology of us, how we have our spiritual sight given to us. We're blind, but now we can see. And we know that in Romans 11, it talks about Israel being blind, a veil on their hearts, but at one point the veil will be lifted and they will see. And you can read about that more in Hosea chapter 5 and elsewhere. But as the pilgrims would go here, and I think I did a sermon on this last year when we were talking about the triumphal entry in Luke, they would go to this pilgrimage road, and you can see the superstructure they built over top of it, because there's a village, an Arab village on top of it. And, if the Arab village collapsed, there would be some people really upset, particularly in the context of everything that's going on over there right now. But this road goes up. It's about 800 meters long from the Pool of Siloam to the Temple Mount. And it goes up in elevation 400 or 500 feet elevation change. So it's steep. But back in those days, it would have been lined with, you can see where they had shops for merchants that would sell things to pilgrims on the road. There are places where people could stop and speak, like little speaker stands. And the question that one of the guides here from the city of David said, well, you want to know, did he come here? Did Jesus come here? And he said, look, if he came to Jerusalem at this time, he would have walked on this road. So they've uncovered, these are the actual stones that would have been on the road at that time. And it was wider. But so their goal is to have everybody come. But when the pilgrims came, is they would go to the book of Psalms, and as they were walking up to the Temple Mount, they would sing Psalms of Ascent. And you should go read these. They're from Psalm 118 to Psalm 130. So I'm going to read one to you today, and I want you to listen to it in the context of what's going on and the controversy that we see. The controversy over Zion. And you'll see today that this really is about Jerusalem. We know at the end, it's about Jerusalem, and it's about the land of Israel. We know in Zechariah 12 and Zechariah 14, Jerusalem will be a burdensome stone for all nations. I will gather all nations against it. This is where the final battle is going to take place. In Joel, it says, I will bring them down into the valley of Jehoshaphat and judge them there because they have done what? They have divided my land, because God made a promise about the land. So get the context of the Psalms of Ascent. As pilgrims were walking up this to the Temple Mount to do their sacrifice, they've been ritually purified in the mikvah. Now they go up to the Temple Mount. And here's this is a Psalm of Ascents. Psalm 129, many a time they have afflicted. Now, so imagine you're there in Jerusalem and you're walking up to the Temple Mount. This is the holiest site in Israel for the nation of Israel, the people of Israel, the Jews. Many a time they have afflicted me from my youth. Let Israel now say, many a time they have afflicted me from my youth, yet they have not prevailed against me. The plowers plowed on my back. They made their furrows long. The Lord is righteous. He has cut in pieces the cords of the wicked. Now listen to this. Let all those who hate Zion be put to shame and turn back. Let them be as the grass on the housetops, which withers before it grows up, with which the reaper does not fill his hand, nor he who binds sheaves his arms. Neither let those who pass them by them say, the blessing of the Lord be upon you. We bless you in the name of the Lord. So here's a psalm that they were singing, one of the psalms that they would ascend. And go read those. Read one every day for the next couple of weeks, and you'll get through them. So we live at this time. So we have this Hamas thing going on. And in Hebrew, Hamas means violence. If you read for violence against my people, for Hamas against my people. Now, I want to go back, though, just 4 weeks, to the UN General Assembly in New York. I guess it would be, this was on September 22nd. So that would be, I guess, five weeks ago. And listen to a couple parts of the speech of Prime Minister Netanyahu, and then an interview a couple days before with Mohammed bin Salman, because I want to put into context how rapidly things can change. The world has changed dramatically since then. So here's Prime Minister Netanyahu at the UN on September 22nd.
Prime Minister of the State of Israel, I invite him to address the Assembly.
Thank you, Mr. President. Ladies and gentlemen, over 3 millennia ago, our great leader Moses addressed the people of Israel as they were about to enter the Promised Land. He said they would find there 2 mountains facing one another. Mount Gerizim, the site on which a great blessing would be proclaimed, and Mount Ebal, the site of a great curse. Moses said that the people's fate would be determined by the choice they made between the blessing and the curse. That same choice has echoed down the ages, not just for the people of Israel, but for all humanity. We face such a choice today. It will determine whether we enjoy the blessings of a historic peace, of boundless prosperity and hope, or suffer the curse of a horrific war of terrorism and despair. When I last spoke at this podium 5 years ago, I warned about the tyrants of Tehran. They've been nothing but a curse, a curse to their own people, to our region, to the entire world. But at that time, I also spoke about a great blessing that I could see on the horizon. Here's what I said, quote, "The common thread of Iran has brought Israel and many Arab states closer than ever before in a friendship that I have not seen in my lifetime." I said, the day would soon arrive when Israel would be able to expand peace beyond Egypt and Jordan to other Arab neighbors, end quote. Now, in countless meetings with world leaders, I made the case that Israel and the Arab states shared many common interests, and that I believed that these many common interests could facilitate a breakthrough for a broader peace in our region. Thank you. Well, you applaud now. But at the time, many dismissed my optimism as wishful thinking.
So understand the context. Here he was, we're going to have peace in the Middle East. This is going to be different. He continued later in his speech talking a little bit more about it.
And anti-Semitism must be rejected wherever it appears, whether on the left or on the right, whether in the halls of universities or in the halls of the United Nations. For peace to prevail, the Palestinians must stop spewing Jew hatred, finally reconcile themselves to the Jewish state. By that I mean not only to the existence of the Jewish state, but to the right of the Jewish people to have a state of their own in their historic homeland, the land of Israel. And let me tell you, the people of Israel yearn for such a peace. I yearn for such a peace.
Okay, and then here's Mohammed bin Salman a couple days before that on Bret Baier on Fox News.
Also mentioned in this deal is Israel. What would it take for you to agree to normalize relations with Israel?
Well, there is approach from President Biden administration to get to that point. For us, the Palestinian issue is very important. We need to solve that part, and we have a good negotiations continue till now. We gotta see where it will go. We hope that it will reach a place that it will ease the life for the Palestinians and get Israel back as a player in Middle East.
There were reports that you had suspended talks.
No, that's not true.
Not true. So you think, if you were to characterize it, are you close?
Every day we get closer. It seems it's for the first time a real one, serious. We gotta see how it goes.
Can you make a deal with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu? Is that somebody you can deal with?
Well, in Saudi Arabia policy, we don't interfere of who's running each country, who's there. We work with him. Now we don't have a relation with Israel.
Well, you get the point. In fact, he went on to say that this will be the greatest peace agreement since the Cold War. Now it's off. In fact, here's an article from the Economic Times in India. War leaves Saudi Prince Mohammed bin Salman's dream of a new Middle East in tatters. Now, I personally think that there's some indication that it might come back. Mohammed bin Salman is a Muslim, but he's also a businessman. And one of the things he seemed to be promoting, allowing to be promoted within Saudi Arabia over the past couple of years was the truth that the Temple Mount in Jerusalem has nothing to do with Islam. There's a theory that has really came up after Israel came into the land, and really after they got partial control, they got control of the Temple Mount and then gave it back in 1967, that became a theory of, oh, this is where Muhammad came in his night journey to the farthest mosque and ascended to heaven. This is not true. If you look at, and I would cite someone as knowledgeable as Dr. Kadar, Mordecai Kadar wrote an article back in 2008, and he said, this is not what the truth is. The farthest mosque was near Mecca at the time of Muhammad. Muhammad never came to Jerusalem. Jerusalem's never mentioned in the Quran. So this is a late developing theory. And so as Mohammed bin Salman has allowed this to be pushed, part of it is to sort of get people away from the Temple Mount. And why does he want to do this? Well, he has built these massive hotels and tourist facilities in Mecca where people will come and stay and spend money. And he wants people to come to Mecca. He will become, when he's king, one of his titles will be the keeper of the two holy mosques, or the custodian of the two holy mosques. The Saudi family succeeded to that back in the 1920s when they took over Mecca and Medina, the second holiest place in Islam, where the Prophet Muhammad is buried. His body is buried in Medina by the Prophet's mosque. So when they took over Mecca and Medina back in the 1920s, and then Saudi became a kingdom in about 1932 under King Saud. And to this day, only sons of King Saud have served as kings of Saudi Arabia. So this is relatively recent. King Saud himself died in 1953, and so since 1953, for the last 70 years, it has been sons of King Saud who have sat on the throne of Saudi Arabia, including the most recent one, King Salman. And barring a coup, and that's always a possibility in Saudi Arabia, these things happen. For example, when President Trump went to Saudi Arabia in 2017 on his first foreign visit, Mohammed bin Salman was not the crown prince at the time. He was sort of the assistant crown prince. It was a few months after that he became the crown prince. He appears to be very good friends with Jared Kushner. There's an interview that I want to play parts of, but I do not have time today. There's a guy named Lex Fridman, Fridman. Lex interviewed about 3 weeks ago Jared Kushner on, I think it was October 11th is when they posted it. And Fridman has very interesting interviews. He does all the big tech guys, and he goes into some detail with people. His interviews will be 2, 3, maybe 4 hours long. You think I'm long-winded? Of course, Fridman doesn't have to talk. He's just asking somebody questions, but they're very insightful interviews. So he did Jared Kushner a few weeks ago, and Kushner's friends with Mohammed bin Salman, and he's still talking about the importance of the Abraham Accords, how we wanted to deal with the Palestinians and that sort of thing, and how this could work out. And there's articles that have been written about the podcast. For example, the end state of the war, Israel has to have a secure environment where they don't feel threatened by Gaza. The people in Gaza need to have an environment where they feel like they can live a better life and have opportunities. Listen, right now, all of this seems to be a bit of a pipe dream. We'll talk about that. But things have changed in Saudi Arabia. There's a generational conflict going on. Mohammed bin Salman wants to change things. He wants to change things about Islam, but he cannot go too far as long as his father is alive. And his father's 87 and bad health, may have dementia, maybe he's 86. But look at how things have changed even in the Saudi press. This is what some of the imagery that's being used, Al-Aqsa storm, and then this is from the Arab news down here below, the second Nakba, when they're talking about what's going on there. And they use this term, Al-Aqsa storm, and I'll talk a little bit about a guy named Erdogan, the president of Turkey, and what he had to say just yesterday to a crowd of what was reported to be 1.5 million people in Istanbul, where he sort of, whatever notion somebody had that he was going to make peace with non-Muslims, I think was completely shattered yesterday. as he talked to this crowd. But Al-Aqsa storm, they take the Temple Mount. There is an Al-Aqsa mosque there at the southern end of the Temple Mount, but then they call Al-Aqsa the whole compound. And so they make up this notion, oh, they're storming Al-Aqsa. They're going to destroy Al-Aqsa. And this has been a common theme of radical Islamist Muslims for a long time. In 1929, almost 100 years ago, a rather despicable individual called the Hajj Aman al-Husseini, who was the most important Muslim person outside of Mecca and Medina, he controlled the Temple Mount. He had been given that authority by General Allenby of the British armed forces when the British defeated the Ottomans in Jerusalem in 1917 during World War I. So he appointed this guy to be the custodian of the holy places. And that title still carries forward to this day. But the Hajj Aman al-Husseini was a very despicable man. And in 1929, he started a rumor. There's no question that he did this. He started a rumor that the Jews were going to destroy Al-Aqsa. The result of that was that about 70 Jews in Hebron, about 30 miles south of Jerusalem, were slaughtered by Muslims. They went on a rampage. They stabbed and killed babies to death. Does this sound familiar? And it was all about Al-Aqsa. So when this started, the entire Muslim world is calling this Al-Aqsa storm or Al-Aqsa flood. And they're referring to this as the second Nakba. You'll see a lot of these things about the people in Iran are sort of projecting power through this. We'll talk a little bit more about this as we go through this. This was an international group who made a joint statement on Israel. U.S. has warned of conflict escalation as tensions rise across the Middle East. I mean, believe me, if I went through that much of the articles that I've read over the past week, we would be here for hours. So I'm just going to try to hit for you the highlights today a little bit. Here's another article, a chilling hostage manual found on a terrorist's bodies. And there have been plenty of, you can find videos out there if you're inclined to find them about what happened. It was terrible. It was bloody. It was horrific what happened along the Gaza border in Israel. There were 1,500 terrorists killed. There were probably well above 4,000 people, about 2,000 Hamas soldiers and 2,000 citizens came across and did these heinous acts. People driving down the road trying to get away and they're shot dead in their car. And people coming along later and say, I can't drive down the road, there's too many bodies on the road, after Israel got control of the thing. I mean, here's part of what the manual says, what they're supposed to do: kill anyone that may pose a threat or cause a distraction or disturbance. Create chaos using firearms, smoke, stun grenades, indirect threats, electric shocks, violence, and terrorism, and killing as a last resort. Bind the wrist or ankles of each hostage. Group binding and strict blindfolding. Block entrances and exits. Car bombs, explosive charges, snipers, stakeouts in the area. They expected to be in the area for quite a while. Now, there's a lot of controversy in Israel about why did it take everybody so long to happen. And what we've seen, though, we know the carnage that took place, but what's happening all over the world are pro-Palestinian marches in all these cities. Yesterday in London, there were 100,000 people marching. There's supposed to be a big march in Washington, D.C. next Saturday. There's been big marches in New York City. New York City issued a warning the other day, at least until the protest was over, all Jews should leave Brooklyn. There's a big Jewish community, particularly in the Crown Heights section of Brooklyn. One of the things they shout as they go through, though, this is, from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. And what does that mean? Well, here's the Hamas logo, and you can see the cross swords and everything, but look at what's at the top of this is Israel. Now, is that in a divided land? Is that a two-state solution in their mind? No, what they want is a one-state solution and no Israel in that one state. From the river to the sea, from the Jordan to the Mediterranean, Palestine will be free. The other thing that you'll hear is we want to go back to the 67 lines. So this is a map of the 67 lines this is before the Six-Day War in 1967. This is what Israel looked like, the blue part being Israel. The brown part being, wait a minute, not Palestine, but under the control of Jordan from 1948 to 1967. And by the way, after the war, this has been offered back to Jordan. They don't want it. When you look at what's going on there, refugees, King Hussein, I played a clip of him a couple weeks ago. This is a red line for us. We don't want any Palestinians in our country. And I believe until recently, and it may still be true, I'm not exactly sure, in Jordan, Palestinians could not get passports. They cannot vote. They cannot work in certain jobs. This is in an Arab country. I can show you pictures of the Yarmouk refugee camp in the city of Damascus that has just been completely obliterated in the Syrian civil war. Now, look, Assad says, well, there was ISIS people there, so we had to do this. It looks just like Gaza does today. It's rubble. By the way, were there any protests in London, at Harvard, at Cal Berkeley, or any other place in the world when Assad destroyed a Palestinian refugee camp in his city of Damascus? It did not happen. They don't have rights to participate in the government in Syria. They don't have it in Lebanon. And there's millions of them. So just stop with this. And by the way, you want to go to the 67, or they say 1967 borders. I say the 67 borders. Well, look, how about we go to the 67 borders and divide the land up based on the 967 BC borders during the kingdom of David and Solomon. How about that? How about those borders, which are historical? By the way, this area was not Palestine. It was Transjordan, the brown area. And by the way, down here in the corner, in the left-hand corner, in the middle, I guess that wouldn't be the corner, the left-handed side, left-hand side of this, that's Gaza. Gaza did not belong to Israel. It belonged to Egypt. Egypt controls that border. In fact, there are bigger fortifications along the Egypt-Gaza border than along the Israel-Gaza border. But there are tunnels underneath, and Egypt sort of, I don't know if they're incompetent or they just allow it. That's how a lot of this stuff gets into Gaza, through the Egyptian border. So my contention is, let's stop with the nonsense about 1967. Let's go to 967 BC, and we'll establish the borders based on that. But nobody seems to want to do that. Here's a picture of a kibbutz. I saw the lady, Adele. She spoke to us when we went to the kibbutz at Niram. She's a spokesperson for the kibbutz there. She spoke to the group when we went down there for the Christian Media Summit in December. She's in the U.S. right now. She's had to evacuate Niram. She was interviewed on Fox News the other night. Her name is Adele, and you can probably find that interview on Fox. It was Fox and Friends in the morning, I think on Wednesday, that she was interviewed. But here's a kibbutz. And what's the deal with this kibbutz? This is where 2 small children, toddlers, hid out. They were shot dead by Hamas. The stories are just horrific. Now, they've finally been able to get a lot of these videos compiled and showed them to international journalists. And I believe there's an archive that may have been released today of things that they're being showed. But there's protest. So now this is kind of a take on how the Iranians might be viewing things right now. You know, usually they want you to walk on the flag, but here are the Iranians walking around the flag in Iran. That's kind of an interesting thing. And by the way, you don't see big movements of Iranian military anywhere, do you? You see assets, drones, and that type of thing, missiles maybe, but they're not moving large chunks of their military into anywhere. They have other people do their things. Somebody said this is really what the sign should say for all these pro-Hamas protests. Stabbing parents in front of children is legal. Throwing grenades at kids hiding in closets is not terrorism. Gazans rape Jewish girls only in self-defense. Beheading is resistance. And you get the point. And this is, how do you come to any other conclusion than these pro-Hamas demonstrations everywhere are like this? So this was yesterday, flood Brooklyn for Gaza. The more they try and silence us, the louder we will be. Caroline Glick tweeted the other day that the Harvard Crimson at Harvard, they've set up safe spaces for Jewish students that are being attacked and threatened. No, for pro-Hamas demonstrators because people are criticizing them. Poor babies. Antonio Guterres at the UN, I'll spare you the clip. He said, well, we can understand how this happened. It didn't happen, this thing, and we condemn what Hamas did, but it didn't happen in a vacuum. And Israel just came out and lambasted it. So he came the next day and he said, well, you might have heard me say that, but that's not really what I meant. And he's been against Israel from day one. He's a radical socialist. How do you think he got into that position? So they had a resolution come to the vote in the UN, and this is Saudi Arabia, Arab news. So you can see the conflict going on in Saudi Arabia. This is the countries who don't support Gaza up at the top. There were 120. This is the resolution they voted on. Here's the vote that took place: 120 in favor, 14 against, and 45 abstained. So you see, it was Austria, Fiji, Israel, Hungary, Czech Republic, Croatia, Micronesia, Papua New Guinea, Paraguay, and the United States, and Tonga voted against this. And everybody else, and it didn't really condemn Hamas. It said, well, we have to protect the civilians in this area. Now, there's a lot of going back and forth in Israel. How did this security breach happen? Somebody really messed up. Netanyahu, the other day, just a couple days ago, said, look, there's going to have to be people accountable. When the war's over, there'll be an inquiry, and some people aren't happy with that. They said we should do it now and get rid of all the people who participated in this. Because there are field commanders who are coming forward and saying, listen, we've been telling our commanders for weeks that something's going on. There's all these protests at the border. They've set off explosives. They're flying, I don't know if they're flying drones or whatever, and we're concerned about what's going to happen. And nobody did anything. Now, it's political. Look, and we can argue back and forth. I've heard some people say, well, Netanyahu must have planned it to save his life and to save his place in office. Look, Folks, let's be realistic about this. If he did that, it was the stupidest, at best, was the stupidest move ever. Because he's done. When this is over, he's gone. And anybody else is gone too. The people won't tolerate it. So here is an interesting picture. So Putin had a bunch of Hamas people come to Israel, or to Moscow to meet with him. And he gave a speech. Oh, we shouldn't attack the civilians. We have to respect the women and children and civilian populations. Like, he's the one who should be saying this to the world after a year and a half, almost 2 years in Ukraine. As I said before, if hypocrisy was water, the world would be experiencing another Noah's flood. But here is a prayer in Moscow. This is kind of an interesting picture. And do you see that they have their backs turned to one of the cathedrals, Russian Orthodox cathedrals in Moscow? They're praying towards Mecca. This is indicative of a problem within Russian society, because years ago, Foreign Policy and Foreign Affairs and other publications were saying Moscow, Russia, has a Muslim problem. Even back then, this is 6-7 years ago, it was estimated that Russia had, the population of Moscow was 25% Muslim. Of Moscow. This is a problem. I think it's changed. There have been reports for a long time that the Russian military is on the verge of becoming Islamic, majority Islamic. Now, I don't know where that stands. I've heard this off and on, but I heard it was going to be 2050, then 2040, then 2030, and then I heard, it's going to happen by 2025. And maybe it is, I don't know. Depends how many have been actually killed in Ukraine, which is pretty much an unknown number. But it's been a lot, and way more on the Ukrainian side. And so this is reported the meeting. Russia says it discussed release of hostages and meeting with visiting Hamas official. Here's another one. This is the Prime Minister of Qatar, I don't know how you say it, Qatar, came out and said, look, you shouldn't do collective punishment. That's not good. You should have a ceasefire. So these are some pictures of, and then here's Ismail Haniyeh, the continuation of the aggression against, he's the head of Hamas, against Gaza. I call upon all the intellectuals and strategic experts to discuss the post-occupation phase because its demise is inevitable. This occupier will not be able to recover. I call on everybody, the free people of the world, all the friendly countries, the brotherly Arab countries, and all the allies to exert all the necessary pressure in all directions and in all forums to stop this war against our children, women, and elderly, our mosques, our universities, and our homes. This brutal aggression must stop. This new Holocaust must stop. The blood of the women, children, and elderly. I'm not saying this blood is not calling for your help. We are the ones who need this blood, so it wakens within us the revolutionary spirit, so it wakens within us resolve, so it wakens within us the spirit of challenge and pushes us to move forward. So that was a statement that he released the other day. Here's a little video. This is kind of a compilation from a website called the Caspian Report. Guy does fantastic videos. If I could figure out how to do this, I would do them. Talked about the incursion that took place. There's been a lot of unrest up in the area called the West Bank, Judea and Samaria. Over 100 people have been killed since October 7th up there. So they have 300,000 troops. There's supposedly maybe 40,000 Hamas fighters. that are there. And so Israel, this was made last week, Israel was planning at the time to go in and make a incursion into Gaza. And look how densely packed together Gaza is. This is Gaza City. So Israel's going to have to go in. They've actually started going in. Now, the last I heard was that no Israeli soldiers have been killed or casualties. But they waited a while because they wanted to prepare the area. So there was a question about how do we go about preparing the area? And some people say you starve them out. You let them run out of fuel, because to keep the air moving in these tunnels, they need fuel. They're running short on fuel. That's why they're asking for fuel in exchange for hostages. Now they've released a couple Americans, a couple Israelis, an 85-year-old woman. And she came back and she said, well, I'm fine. They treated me well. Well, her husband's still being held. What do you expect her to say? This is intelligence that the IDF released the other day about the Hamas headquarters located underneath a large hospital in Gaza City. This is a graphic that they made up. In the north part of the Shifa Hospital, in the north part of the Gaza Strip. And underneath there are tunnels that connect all these different places. Well, what is Israel supposed to do? They're using human shields. That violates the laws of war. But nobody really seems to care about that. So this is another graphic about the tunnel system that's in there. Let's see, I wanted to. And so the question is, you can imagine how hard it's going to be to go in there. Now, they're going to have to level this place, and they're working on it, and they're probably going to do that. Here's another graphic that was in the Times of London. They'd just been bombing them. And again, here's a little bit of a graphic. There's 300 miles of tunnels. How are they going to deal with this? And there could be heavy casualties. The Times of London, I thought, had a kind of insightful editorial cartoon the other day. It was this. Somebody asked, scientists asking a robot, could AI cause a war and pose a threat to humanity? And the robot says, looks like you're pretty good at doing that by yourselves. So they've started to go in. Just a tremendous amount of firepower. You can see the destruction that's being leveled in Gaza. There's a lot of back and forth between Netanyahu and his cabinet. Netanyahu came out after he announced the war. I'll show you the video of that in just a moment. And he said, nobody told me about this. And then he came out and apologized for having tweeted that. Again, I'm telling you, that was a very bad thing to do politically. And I just don't think there's any way he survives this politically, whether you like him or not. There's plenty of people in Israel that don't. A lot of people going to Israel to serve. They've had a call up, and they said in the call up, 300,000 people came. Or we called up 300,000. We had 160% report rate, which means a lot of people who are in the retired reserves are showing up ready to fight, and they don't have equipment. They don't have body armor and that sort of thing. So they'll go in there with tanks, and I'll play you a clip in a minute if I remember. Just remind me to play the Doran clip. Just remind me by the end. I have to insert it into my presentation. So here's some of the pictures of Israel going into Gaza. You can see the Tehran Times. It's just brutal. Of course, Israel went in and then they came back out, and Hamas came out and said, "Look, they're scared of us. They're running for their lives." And it was part of a thing. Here's Netanyahu's announcement. It's about a minute and a half. This is translated of going in the war.
מבהירים שיש דבר אחד
We
שצריכים
clarify
לעמוד בו.
there's one thing we have to recognize.
יש רגעים
There
שבהם
are
אומה
moments
ניצבת בפני שתי
where a
אפשרויות.
nation faces two possibilities,
או לחדול.
to be or not to
אנו
be.
מצויים כרגע
We are now
במבחן כזה.
in such a test.
ואין לי ספק איך הוא
And
יסתיים.
there's no question how it's going to end. We are going to be the ones to prevail. We are going to be here and we shall win. In the first weeks of the war, we bombed the enemy with massive air attacks. And the last few days, even more so, in order to help our forces to go in, land in the most safe way. We eliminated a lot of leaders of the Hamas and a lot of infrastructure, but we're only in the beginning of the road. The war within the Gaza Strip will be harsh and long, but we are ready. This is our second war of liberation. We are going to fight to protect the country. We're going to fight. We will not retreat by land, by sea, by air. We shall eliminate the enemy on top of the land and the bottom, and we shall prevail. It'll be the good over evil, light over darkness, life over death. In this war, we are standing together, united more than ever, sure of our justice. This is the mission of our life.
So that's Netanyahu, and he went on, talked about 10 minutes, and then Gallant came and talked. They were on the air for about 25 minutes. So these are just some of the stats. I'm going to be kind of interspersed with some things I'm talking about. So here, this is in between October 7th and October 25th, the rocket attacks. 570 towns in Israel had emergency alarms. 4,925 Israeli citizens had to run to a secure area. I have some more stats in just a minute. A lot of belief that Iran is behind this. More and more evidence of that, but for some reason, our government, our president, and his State Department doesn't seem to be able to say what the truth really is. While all this is going on, everybody's distracted. Russia's sort of increasing its attacks in Ukraine. This is a brutal war there. As I said, Netanyahu called this our second war of independence. Now, I want to talk about Erdogan for a few minutes. So here's Erdogan. He was supposed to come to Israel within the next week or so for talks with Netanyahu and the Israeli government. As you can imagine, that's off. Instead of sort of, well, let's talk about this reasonably. This is Yeni Safek. This is one of Erdogan's main mouthpieces. He's talking about this. Here's Yeni Safek today relating this rally in Istanbul that Erdogan spoke at yesterday, supposedly 1.5 million people. And you can see the big crowd, and you see the poster behind the speaker's podium. Here's a close-up of that. This is what was used to fire up the crowd. We have to protect Al-Aqsa. This is the Dome of the Rock. They use this all the time. So Netanyahu, Erdogan gave this speech. You see his wife there and all his leaders, and you see the Muslim scarf the Palestinian scarf that he's wearing with the Palestinian flag on one side and the Turkish flag on the other. And he said, these are just some of the things that he said in this speech. We can come at any night unexpectedly, talking about going to Israel. Today, some people see Gaza as a place that is far away and has nothing to do with us. And unfortunately, they can't even say this openly. However, Gaza was what Adana was for this nation a century ago, because right now they're celebrating the 100th anniversary of the nation of Turkey. After the Ottomans fell in 1923, there were some treaties, one of them the Treaty of Lausanne, which Erdogan hates, trying to undo this with facts on the ground necessarily. So they're in a big important thing. So he says this: Hamas is not a terrorist organization. It is a liberation organization. They are freedom fighters. Netanyahu is a terrorist. There's no victor or winner except Allah. Israel, how did you end up in these lands? You are an invader. Turkey owes you nothing, but the West owes you much. How did the Ottomans end up with them? by an invasion. Again, if hypocrisy was water, the world would drown. I address you, West, do you want to resurrect the Crusades? You should know that this nation is not dead. Know that whatever we were in Libya, in Karabakh, in Azerbaijan, that's where we are in the Middle East. And I'll have to talk about the Azerbaijan-Armenia dispute in Karabakh, where they forced the Armenians out. They ethnically cleansed the Armenians. And Erdogan would say, well, this is because we have a shared border with Azerbaijan. It's like this wide on the map. It's barely a border. But they wanted to ethnically cleanse this area. And there's other reasons for that. Israel cannot move, he said, without them. The West is most to blame for Gaza. It's the fault of the West. Israel cannot move without them. And even if it does, it'll collapse in 3 days. It's tragic comedy how the West is trying to cover for Israel. The Western leaders aren't even calling for a ceasefire. Look at what's happened. No electricity, no water, no food, no medical supplies, no hospitals. They are operating without anesthesia and in the dark. O world, you have become blind. The savagery of Israel. In Salah, he says, we shall see those days. 75 years of oppression will end. The West will one day leave, and Israel will be left all alone with the people they oppressed for 75 years. Rest assured that you will be in need of Turkey's help. Listen to us. Open the doors for aid. Open the doors to us that we may come in. So Michael Doran tweeted this. He says, this is the point where I admit that my dream of a new dawn in Turkey-Israeli relations is fading. Doran is a very intelligent guy. Might have some issues. I think there's some issues I have with him. But so he says here, look, we will declare Israel a war criminal. We are already working on this, lower right-hand side, or lower part of that tweet. Everyone knows that Israel is just a pawn in the region that can be sacrificed when the time comes. Those who shed crocodile tears for the civilians killed yesterday in Ukraine, Russia are today silently watching the deaths of thousands of innocent children in the Gaza Strip. The West is responsible for what is happening in the Gaza Strip. The massacre there is entirely the work of the West. And then this tweet also has interesting, here's the English language of this tweet. The audience chants they want to see the Turkish army in Gaza. And the answer is, it's an Islamic chant. We may show up one night without an appointment. And then this tweet notes Baku, that's Azerbaijan, supplies a high percentage of Israel's oil. The oil goes from the coast of Turkey and then to Israel, and it goes in a pipeline across Turkey. And here's what that pipeline map looks like. And they're saying, why don't you cut them off, Erdogan? Cut them off, Erdogan, and get rid of them. But then this is probably the most interesting tweet of all. This is a tweet from Esra Erdogan. She goes the name Esra Turkey, Turke. She is the daughter of Erdogan. She happens to be married. I know this is hard to believe. People complain about sort of almost incestuous relationships within American government. My own experience in D.C. has been that when you start talking to people in D.C., everybody's been married to somebody else who's been now married to somebody else who runs this agency or that legal department. Oh yeah, my ex-wife's husband runs that legal department. And my new wife, she ran that legal department. And then they go to these big firms and make millions of dollars. She happens to be married to the finance minister of Turkey. And there's been a number of things. I think they had to get rid of Erdogan's son because they just couldn't keep with the scandal. But here's what that tweet really says. Our Mohammedan army will come one night by surprise to support the people of Palestine. And then she says this is from the speech yesterday. Soon we will see the cross broken under the Islamic crescent. This is what Erdogan said yesterday. Does that sound like he's a man of peace right now? But we know Turkey's very significant in end times Bible prophecy with Ezekiel 38 and 39. It's clear that they're part of this. And remember what he did a number of years ago. This is Hagia Sophia, the largest church in Christendom, built back, I don't know, 1,000 years. I mean, it stood for over 1,000 years. He turned it back into it was a museum, it was a church, then a museum. Now he's turning it back into a mosque. Now, I don't think Christians have been protesting this. And remember, I refer you to this map again. When Trump went to move the U.S. Embassy to announce that and to move the U.S. Embassy to Jerusalem in 2017, December 2017, within a few days, this map appeared in one of Erdogan's propaganda mouthpiece newspapers, Yeni Safek. And I've said, I think I said this with J.B. Hickson, this is like all the prophecy teachers. We all have, Ezekiel 38 and 39 maps. And lo and behold, here 6 years ago, Erdogan put up maybe the best one ever because he included the stand republics in Central Asia. And I think those play a role in all of this. So, I don't have time. But did you hear about this hurricane down in Acapulco? Category 5. How many of you even heard about it? It just destroyed Acapulco. I mean, it may never recover. It's had enough problems with the drug gangs and everything. So here's this opinion piece in the Arab News. The Israeli war against Hamas must not be a war against Gaza. Now everybody's concerned about that. Here's what the Iranian foreign minister said. No one can guarantee the control of the situation and the non-expansion of the conflicts. And that's a concern. It's going to go forward. Here's a picture of the tunnels that they've built. This was back in 2017. This was a tunnel entrance that they found and uncovered. Netanyahu, again, this is our second war of independence. This is, again, another Shabbat table setting representing the 229 hostages that are still being held. Here's Wall Street, New York Times, yesterday talking about the ground war starting. This is an interesting article. This is from Israel Hayom this morning about what the Ayatollah says, but on the right is a picture of all the hostages. And a couple dozen of these are little children. I mean, I saw a picture of this cute little blonde, curly-haired 3-year-old. She's a hostage there. So don't tell me about cruelty or anything like that. And so now the question is Tehran going to get involved? That's the question that everybody's asking. This is kind of a difficult problem. This is a picture of soldiers overlooking the city of Metula in the north. This is farthest north town, village, city in Israel, up against the Lebanon border. And here's what some of the rest, this is in Israel Hayom this morning. We will not return if Hezbollah is not eliminated. Residents of Metula who were evicted from their homes in sharp criticism from the hotel in Tiberias, we will rebuild the community, not sure in the same place. On the other hand, they say we will return in any situation, this is our home. And others say we're not going to return until Hezbollah is defeated. And so there's been this evacuation. Of course, this is a map of north part of Israel. Metula would be in that dark area in the center. Over here on the right, let's see if I can get my laser pointer going. I wish this was bigger, but so this is Tel Dan over here in this area. And then if you've ever been to Tel Dan, this is the Tel at Tel Dan, ancient city of Dan, where the holy place was, where Jeroboam put up the golden calf, one of the golden calves. This is a town called Gejar, and this is called Sheva Farms. It's a disputed area. Lebanon claims it, but back in the Six-Day War in 1967, it was part of Syria. In fact, along the north part of the Tel here, there's a trench that was dug by the Israeli soldiers for protection during the Six-Day War. And it's still there. You can look at it. In fact, what they did was they brought in rabbis and archaeology experts and say, okay, can we dig a trench here for protection? They didn't go in and destroy it. They were very careful about that. But you can see here, this is the blue line. This is the border. This is Metula. And then down here, this is Kiryat Shimona. It's a town of about 25,000. All these towns up here have been evacuated. And then there's roads that go across the Lebanon border. PM and I drove these roads right along the border when we were there back in, actually the road we picked up was down here just outside of Kiryat Shimona. And then we drove across the border all the way over to Nahariya. But here's the stats from the war so far. Rockets fired into Israel, 7,500. This is unprecedented. Reservists called up, 360,000. Israeli hostages, 229. Although 4 were released, and there was a news report I saw this morning that 8 Russian nationals may be released after Putin gave Hamas some favorable publicity. Internally displaced Israelis, 125,000. And the question is, when are they going to go back? In Gaza, there's 700,000 displaced, 18,000, almost 19,000 injured, 7,300 dead, 7,000 military attacks or talk. In the West Bank, though, there's a problem. 102 Palestinian deaths, 1 Israeli murdered, and over 1,000 detained. These are really unprecedented numbers. But these are the towns along the border. That's 13, 9, 5, 8. These are the ones that have been evacuated. And the question is, when are they going to back? Here's the towns along the Gaza Strip that have been evacuated, the kibbutzes, villages, towns. Now, people were initially told, well, you're probably not going to get back for 3 months. Now, some of them are saying that they've heard that it's really more like 3 years. That's north and south. These people, Kiryat Shimona is 25,000 people. It's like Delaware, the city of Delaware here, and it's evacuated. What happens to all those businesses, people that own those businesses? And how long can they go to survive this? This is a map that the Israeli Institute for National Security Studies put up about who's supporting Israel, that's the blue, and who's supporting the Palestinians, that's the red. Kind of interesting the way that map is breaking down. People are talking about this. I really don't have time to go into it. This is a real test for America. What's Biden going to do? What's he doing? I haven't had time to try. I've been trying to figure it out, and I don't know what the guy's doing, or whoever's running the show is doing. I know that Obama came out and gave some very, what I would term, pro-Hamas statements the other day. And if I do a midweek update this week, which is likely, I will put something in that. And I'll probably do a Kushner interview with Lex Fridman. I'll talk about what Obama said. It's not encouraging. Qatar is involved in this. They fund Hamas, their Muslim Brotherhood. Hamas was originally out of the Muslim Brotherhood. They get funding from Qatar. And so Qatar's playing both sides of this right now. They want to look like, well, we're the peacemakers, but they're also funding, they wanted the support in the Arab world, and they're very wealthy. And lo and behold, this is from the Peninsula. This is the front page of their paper the other day. Who shows up to see the prime minister or foreign minister of Qatar? Right on the front page. That's Klaus Schwab. We had to come and discuss what we have in common. Qatar they put up Al Jazeera, which is pure propaganda. They were meeting with people from Turkey and other countries. This is in Saudi Arabia. While this is going on, they have their Financial Investment Initiative Institute meeting, which they call Davos in the Desert. And they're big promoters of diversity, equity, and inclusion. and ESG, environmental, social, and governance. A lot of that has its roots in this conference. This was the 7th reiteration of it. It was at the first or second one back in 2017 that Mohammed bin Salman, the new crown prince at that time in the fall, got up, had an interview with Maria Bartiromo of Fox Business, and he announced the new city that he was building called Neom. And that was where it first was introduced. Again, this is an article from Jonathan Spire. You can find this in the Jerusalem Post Friday, Understanding Qatar's Role in the Region. And he goes on and he just says, listen, this is Qatar's playing both sides, and you need to watch what Qatar is doing because they're not to be trusted. In Syria, Jonathan says, Qatar supported Islamist and jihadi elements among the Syrian rebels, including Jabhat al-Nusra. And Jonathan Spire is an expert on Syria, unmatched, I think, in the world. The former franchise of al-Qaeda in Syria, Qatar offered refuge to Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, the mastermind of 9/11. And it goes on and on. Qatar's strategy has thus succeeded in gaining the tiny emirate a seat at the top of Middle East diplomacy. On the way, it has served to strengthen and facilitate a variety of jihadi movements and to foment unrest and chaos across the region. Qatar is not a facilitator of humanitarian solutions. It is a state that draws dividends from carrying a flamethrower in one hand and a fire hose in the other. It should no longer be permitted to do so. And he's right. They play both firefighter and arsonist in these situations. Excellent article by Jonathan Spire. So I'm going to put in a quick video. This is Gadi Taub and Michael Doran on, I think they call their channel The Turning Point Israel at War. They're putting up videos every few days about situations in the war. I'm going to jump into the middle of this. And it's very interesting what they do. Okay, so here's Gadi Taub and then Michael Doran, and you'll see what they're talking about. They're talking about the nature of the war that's being fought. I think this is a brilliant discussion, very important. Of course.
The generations of Moshe Dayan and Yitzhak Rabin, of the warriors, assumed that Jewish existence would need to be vigilant, that we could not let go of the sword. There's this famous Golda Meir quote that said, when Arabs put down their weapons, there will be peace. When Jews put down their weapons, they will be killed. And we were reminded of that. We have been reeling for a long time from the illusion of Oslo, from the illusion of peace, from the illusion that our neighbors have accepted us. And this illusion fostered what? It fostered the very idea that we can deter Hamas. What was deterrence based on, Mike? It was the whole establishment in Israel said, well, if we give them jobs, if they have a modicum of comfort, they will not risk it from crazy utopian vision. And apparently they're willing to be killed, and sacrifice their children because killing Jews is more important than anything else.
All right. Well, on that thought, let's move to the revolution in military affairs. And we have a video to show you that Hamas put out about one of the techniques that it used to overcome the Israelis. And I want to talk to you a little bit about it, Gadi, but let's first show it to the viewers. They're going to see a quadcopter, commercially available drone, dropping an RPG on an Israeli tank.
these quadcopters can probably be bought for a couple $1,000s.
Okay, so there you have it, Gadi. That what the Iranians have been doing for the last 5-10 years, even longer, they have been distributing to all of their allies in the region their network of proxies and agents. They've been distributing disruptive military technologies. This is mainly, but not exclusively, missiles, drones, and cruise missiles, which they combine together in the same strike packages, and they can overcome the defenses of any adversary, including Israel and the United States.
How does it work in combination?
Well, because what happens when you put them in, they all have different flight patterns and different flight behavior, and so they can overcome both the sensors and the interceptors of even the most sophisticated systems, including Iron Dome and David Sling and the THAAD that the Americans have, and so on. It has created what in military terms we call an offense dominant regime. What's offense dominant? I can give it to you in very simple terms. I have a pistol, you have a Kevlar vest. I can shoot 6 bullets at you with my pistol. Your Kevlar vest is going to stop 5 of those bullets. That's from a statistical point of view, from the point of view of the builders of the makers, manufacturers of Kevlar vests. That's a fantastic vest. It's going to stop 5 out of 6 bullets. But if I have 6 bullets to shoot at you, that fantastic statistical analysis is wonderful. Except if I get a medical analysis, you're dead because one of those bullets got through. That's an offense dominant regime. And when you add to the fact that just to go on with the metaphor, the Kevlar vest is much more expensive than the bullets. You see what we just saw there is a quadcopter in that video. That's a quadcopter that is commercially available. You can buy it at Walmart, and it's dropping a twin charge RPG. One blows a hole in the armor, and the other then blows it up. The American tanks, all tanks, American tanks, Israeli tanks, they are susceptible to vertical attack. They were built originally with the idea in mind that the anti-tank weapons were going to come at them horizontally. So they have good armor on the sides, but not on the top. They can be penetrated on the top. So that's I don't know how much. Is it a $5 million tank? Something like that. Maybe it's 7, 5, whatever. A lot of money. Then you have
these quadcopters, these drones cost nothing.
They cost nothing.
Well,
they cost nothing. I haven't priced them.
So you can basically
$2,000 maybe.
So for say $2,000 and whatever the RPG costs, you can blow up tanks, and you can buy a legion of them.
And think about not just the tank, the cost of the tank itself, but also the crew. The crew then becomes vulnerable, and it takes, how long does it take to train a talented crew? A proficient crew, maybe 2 years. That's a huge cost, investment, but also people. If you can and think about it, how sensitive Israel is to captives. If you can take a tank crew captive, that's also huge political leverage that you have. This is an advantage that the Iranians have given to all of their entire network, and it's an advantage over Israel and an advantage over the United States. We've spent so much time talking in the last 5-7 years about the Iranian nuclear capabilities that we have lost sight about these disruptive conventional capabilities that they have. They're using them in they're relatively unsophisticated weapons, which they're using in very sophisticated ways, and we see the results on October 6th.
And how does this relate?
So I want to just finish up with this. So remember, this is northern Israel, And I could put up a map of Gaza and that type of thing with all the different communities again. But this is a graphic that was prepared by the Institute for National Security Studies. And it shows the rocket attacks. So this is going to compress the rocket attacks between October 7th and October 18th into about, I don't know, maybe 20 seconds. So look at this and how these rocket attacks happened. Then you'll see some from the north. Again, we'll go through it again. So you can see there are like 7,500 rockets. And maybe they need to fire, these rockets cost, I don't know, $5,000, $6,000 to build maybe, if that. But it costs $80,000 to $100,000 for an Iron Dome to shoot them down. That's the way they don't shoot them all down. Now, that's 7,500. They have 30 times that amount at Hezbollah up in Lebanon. Some of those are precision guided. So this is not going to be easy. So the question is the war going to move up to the north? And that's anybody's guess right now. That's what's going to happen. So just pay attention to that. So I will try to do, probably, I think we'll do a midweek update just to catch up on some of the things I had to leave out today. The world changed 2 weeks, 3, 4 weeks ago. Everybody was like, oh, there's going to be peace in the Middle East. This is unlike anything that we've ever seen. And now it's changed. Now, I do think that Saudi Arabia is in a generational conflict over how they're going to support the Palestinians. Always use quotes around that, but that's what everybody calls them. Are they going to support them? When the Houthis, which is Iranian proxies in Yemen, to the south, shot drones and missiles at Israel, it's now been confirmed that one of those was shot down by the Saudis. Shooting down an Arab country when the war is going on in Gaza, shot down a missile heading for Israel. By the way, they shot some more. They appear to be aiming at a lot down at the Red Sea, but they missed, and some of those landed in Egypt. So you saw what Erdogan's talking about. You saw that the King of Jordan saying that this Palestinian refugees coming to here is a red line. We won't take it. Now, I don't think Jordan is much of a military threat. Egypt probably is a little bit more so of a military threat. But Egypt has a border with Gaza. Why is nobody complaining about them? When they had it, by the way, they let a war happen between Fatah, Palestinian Authority group in Gaza, and Hamas. 8,000 people were killed in that civil war. They did a lot of the same things they did when they got across the Israeli border. So this thing is complicated. I do think it's prophetic, and we need to pay attention to the things that are going on. So let's pray. Lord, thanks for the day. Thank you so much for your word. We pray, Lord, that you'll help us, give us wisdom on how to act and prepare at a time like this. Keep us in your word. Fill us with your Holy Spirit. Give us an extra dose of wisdom to act in this world. Bless us this week in Jesus' name. Amen.